Hello, hello. Okay, hi everybody. So happy Wednesday. Sorry, my eyes were looking in that direction. I'm just checking that LinkedIn is working. So, hi everybody. Let me just head back to the comments. So, as always, if you're a regular, I'm going to ask you a favor and ask you to just type me something in the comments so that I know you can hear me okay and that you can see me okay and that the stream is coming through. I'm going to do a little test for myself. Test in LinkedIn. That's working. That's my pseudonym in LinkedIn. That's me at the weekends. Right. So, anybody else out there? Alekia, I can see you're here already. Oh, Lo Monk, welcome back. Haven't seen you for a few weeks. Alekia, you're there. Awesome. Hello. Okay. So, we're going to give it a few minutes because, as always, it usually takes people a while to arrive. Not seeing anybody coming through from LinkedIn. We'll give it a couple of minutes. So what do I do? I mean, I've got the two of you here, Lo Monk and Alekia. Like, we could have a chat between the two of us. Ooh, Zed Soup Zed. You can say it's the first time in my live session. I was about to say that I would absolutely recognize that name. So I haven't seen that one before. So welcome, welcome. Oh, you found my channel a few days ago and you've got your panel in an hour. Oh, I hate those stories. They break my heart. That damn YouTube algorithm. I do absolutely everything that I think I'm supposed to do to crack it. And it's just really, really hard. There's so much rubbish ahead of me in that algorithm, which means people like you, Zed Soup Zed, don't find me until the last minute, which I find super frustrating, but I will continue to try. So we've got YouTube people here, but no one from LinkedIn. So, oh well, maybe LinkedIn doesn't like me this week. Who knows? All right. So, whilst we're still waiting for a couple of people, let's get some introductions going. So, Lo Monk, I know who you are and where you're from, so that's awesome. Alekia, also, you're a very regular person now. I feel like we've almost become friends in this strange one direction vocal conversation we have. So I know you. Zed Soup Zed, where are you from? Tell us. I'd love to know. We've got Balu. I hope I've pronounced that right. I'm really sorry if I didn't. You've joined. Where have you come from? That would be great to know. Honeybee. Oh, that's so, I love that, Honeybee. So there's a brand in the UK of honey called Gale's Honey. So my mum always liked to call me Honey when I was growing up. So Honeybee, that's cool. Where are you from, Honeybee? Let us know. Richard, welcome back. I'm sure I've seen you before. Yeah, so cool. Thank you for my thumbs up. I'm guessing something's going wrong with YouTube here. I've got someone else messaging me. Something's not right with YouTube. I mean, with LinkedIn. Okay, so let's see what I can quickly do about that. Bear with me 2 seconds for you guys there on. Okay. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So I've got Rosemary here from LinkedIn, but it's not parsing its way through to StreamYard, which is very strange. Okay. So, oh, it is now. It seems to be coming through. So, Rosemary, I can see you on LinkedIn, but I can't see your comment on StreamYard, which is my streaming service here. So what I'm going to try and do is have one eye here on StreamYard for, oh, I can see you now there, Rosemary. You've come through. Awesome. All right. So we have finally landed as far as LinkedIn is concerned. I've had to do some branding changes on LinkedIn, which means people who are looking for Amazon stuff aren't necessarily seeing my stuff. I won't share with you why. I've had to do some branding changes, but I have. So we may be a bit light on the LinkedIn side, but hey ho, you guys are here, so we're going to push on through. So welcome, Rosemary. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. So, okay, let us just see where we are. We've got Sammy from Washington, D.C. Sammy, I'm sure you were here the other day. So welcome back. Delighted to see you back. We've got Tanya back. Awesome. Hey, Tanya. Good to see you again. All right. So why don't we get going? I will do the introductions. Most of you I recognize, so I'm really sorry you're going to hear a repeat. So you can tidy your desks or do something useful like that whilst I do my thing. So I am Gigi and I am the Amazon interview whiz. Sorry, I'm holding my back because I'm having a really bad back problem at the moment. So if you see me wince and rubbing my back, that's why. I'm the Amazon interview whiz. I am an ex-Amazonian and interview bar raiser. I now run my own Amazon interview preparation academy, where my mission is to make expert Amazon interview expertise accessible to all. I realized when I was at Amazon and I was interviewing and bar raising that people that got coaching did a lot better. It was pretty clear to me who had had coaching. And then I discovered how much coaching costs, which is quite a lot of money. And quite a lot of people don't have that money lying around the place. So I've tried to build a way of making expertise like mine available to everybody through my YouTube channel, which I'm guessing loads of you are obviously watching, my daily posts on LinkedIn, these free coaching sessions, and then my academy, which is a whole digital program for Amazon interview preparation. Because it's digital, it's scalable, and therefore I can make it way cheaper than finding the same information from an interview coach. And if you hang on until the end, I will give you an amazing freebie from my academy. So the majority of you guys are on YouTube. So I'm going to ask you a big favor. It's not actually a very big favor. I'm going to ask you a favor in return for what I am giving you. We talked about, before you joined, some of you, that breaking through that YouTube algorithm is really, really difficult. In order to do it, I need your help. So please, in return for what I'm doing for you, please like the stream. So that's actually heading out of the stream and kind of clicking the thumbs up on the actual stream itself. Comment, please. When we get off, make a comment or two. Obviously, it tells the algorithm there is good stuff going on here and helps increase my visibility in the algorithm. So people like Z Soup Z won't find me minutes before their panel interviews, and I can help more people. So please, in return, please do that for me. So the way it works, I will read through the comments. I will try and pick comments that are most useful for everybody. I will not go into specific technical questions. There are over 300 job families in Amazon, and no one person can be a technical expert in exactly what's going to happen in that particular job family interview. Impossible. But I am an expert at the leadership principles. I am an expert at interview strategy. I am an expert at working at Amazon. I was there for 5 years. So I will cover all of those types of questions. Please don't ask me for general advice. General advice can be found on my YouTube channel, where pretty much every single video, except for the ones for grads and military, are applicable to everybody. All right, so feel free to chat with each other in the stream as well. That seems to work really well, where people have little chats in the sidebar. So feel free to do that. Let's get going. All right, so please just type in your questions and I will attempt to answer them. So I'll say hi to people as they arrive as well. So let me just read. Ah, Blue. Okay. So you cleared an interview with AWS in the UK, best country on the planet. But you haven't received an offer, but luckily your recruiter called you up and offered you another role in the UK. So it's likely you will be getting into Amazon. Okay, well, fingers crossed for you. I hope it goes well. The Amazon UK office in Principal Place, gosh, I almost forgot that. It's been a while since I was there. In Shoreditch is absolutely awesome if that's where you're potentially headed. There's an amazing coffee shop just around the corner from it. So fingers crossed for you. I hope you manage to get in that place. It's a brilliant building full of awesome people. So fingers crossed for you. Okay. Honeybee. All right. So Honeybee, I noticed a bit further down, you're in India. So you've an interview tomorrow. It'll be your third loop. So I'm assuming you're saying that you've had different interview processes before, got to loop and not passed once, got to loop and not passed twice, and now you're in train for another role and you have finally made it. You are at loop again. So you've been asked about deliver results and dive deep. Can I suggest LPs for tomorrow's loop? No, I absolutely can't suggest LPs for tomorrow's loop because, well, up here, I don't know what role you're applying for, although, I can see you've put it in later on. Different roles require different leadership principles. Even within the same job family, different particular roles are going to require different leadership principles depending on the nascency of the business, the nature of the business, the particular role and how it interacts with other business teams around it, the needs of the hiring manager. They're all completely different. So I can't tell you what the key leadership principles are. What you need to do is go through your job description with a fine tooth comb. Hopefully you really understand the leadership principles well. And if you do, you should be able to go through that job description and see words that make you think of different leadership principles. So if you go through that job description, I expect you will find deliver results and dive deep somewhere in there. And as you go through it, note what other leadership principles you think you can see in the language. And those would be the leadership principles that I would be saying to focus on for your interview. Don't ignore all the rest, because once you get to loop, you're going to probably be asked at least 10 different leadership principles. So find the ones you can, but don't ignore the others. So I'm sorry I couldn't tell you exactly what you wanted to know, but no one would be able to tell you exactly what you wanted to know other than if they'd read your actual job description. Okie dokie. So moving on. Okay, Z Soup Z. So you've got your thingy in an hour, so we don't have very much time. So I'm going to try and give you kind of a headspace tip, which is you're saying you've watched all my videos on YouTube, fine, but you're still struggling to see a question on its own and connect it to a leadership principle. So what I would have told you if you'd been saying this to me like a week ago is you kind of need to not worry about connecting the question to a leadership principle in the moment. That work should have been done by now, because what you'll be doing is understanding the leadership principles, going back into your career history and pulling out examples that align to that leadership principle. If you have a few different examples, what will then happen is, because the questions themselves align to the leadership principles, the questions come from the leadership principles. If the examples that you've created also come from the leadership principles, when you're asked a question, you shouldn't need to go question, leadership principle, example, because you've already created the examples that match the leadership principles. So you should be able to go question to example. You shouldn't even need to process in your head what leadership principle you're being asked on. All you'll need to think about is, do I have an example pre-prepared, regardless of what leadership principle I prepared it for? Do I have an example pre-prepared that sounds a bit like that question? So try and free yourself, Z Soup Z, from listening to the question, trying to go, oh, what leadership principle is that? Oh, what example did I prepare for that leadership principle? And rather try and think of, here is the question. Do I have an example in my bank of questions that sounds similar to that question? And then you can kind of free yourself of that panic of trying to create the bridge. And if you don't have an example in your bank of questions that sounds anything, sorry, bank of examples that sounds anything like that question, what you can say to the interviewer is, look, I'm really sorry, I don't actually have a good example that matches that question. If you have one that's slightly similar, you can say, but I do have one that's slightly similar. It goes like this, and give them like 4 sentences to explain it. Can I use that one? They may say yes, in which case truck on, because the differences don't matter to them. They may say no, because where the differences do exist, they are important. In which case, I would suggest you say to them, well, in which case, I really don't have a good example for this question. I don't want to waste your time or my opportunity. Could I please have another question? It's okay to ask for another question a couple, once, twice at most. Once is kind of probably ideal. It is okay to ask for another question, but free yourself of trying to make the connection between the question, the leadership principle, and your example, and think about the question and just bridge straight to your bank of examples that you have in your head. I hope that helps. Okie dokie, moving on then. Richard, you've got your loop next week and you're feeling confident about having gone through my masterclasses. Awesome. We do have, it depends on when next week you have your interview. It might be before, but we do have an Academy exclusive Q&A session on Thursday. So that's not tomorrow, but the following Thursday. If that's in timing for you, then please do come along that and I can dive a little bit deeper on any questions that you have. But good luck. I hope it goes well. I'm glad you have found the masterclasses useful. Okay, moving on then. Oh, Tanya, you've got a continuation there. Oh, cool person, you've arrived. Cool. Love to have a cool person on the session. So, Tanya, okay, so a little bit higher up, you say that you had your last interview, which was probably with the bar raiser, since they told you they weren't from the team. Yeah, odds are that that was then possibly your bar raiser. You were sad because you weren't able to use your best examples because you didn't get many behavioral questions. Okay, so not quite sure whether it mean you weren't able to use your best example with the bar raiser or you weren't able to use your best examples at all in any part of the process. So let's pretend for the moment that you're sad that you didn't get to give your best examples to the bar raiser, in which case I would say don't worry about it. They will absolutely see all of the data that anybody has gathered throughout your process. So if you didn't get to do it with them, don't worry. They will still see it. They will still measure it. They will still be impressed by it. If you're sad that you didn't get to use your best examples because nobody asked you the questions in order to get your best examples out, I'd be sad too. I'm sorry, I don't have anything beyond that to give you. So your interviewer asked you where you prepared from and you're still curious why. Yeah, sure. Maybe I think you say oh, you've got something a bit further down, Tanya. Hang on, I'm gonna jump down. Oh, Tanya, this is massive. I'm keeping going. All right. So sorry, everybody. This is a little bit of a journey for all of us with this conversation with Tanya. So they asked you where you prepared from. So sounds like they were probably impressed. You answered by saying you've researched a lot. He was smiling. You say you keep yourself busy. He could see a number of courses. Do I think he was impressed? Tanya, I can't answer that question. I have to be honest with you. Having gone through all of this, there's no way for me to know so many points removed. All you can do is go on your instinct. If he asked where you're prepared from, it sounds to me like you probably did a good job and they're thinking how did they go about preparing for themselves? Equally, it might just be a standard question that they ask all of the interviewees because it's just something that they've come up with. Don't forget that although there is a best practice and there is the Amazon interview question bank, interviewers are allowed to come up with their own questions. They are allowed to kind of go slightly off book and off kind of game plan in order to learn things that they're curious about. So I don't know, Tanya, maybe they were impressed. Maybe it was just something that they ask everybody. It's kind of impossible for me to say at this stage, I'm afraid. Okay, so I'm going to pop back up there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool person. This is a good question. So, what would the appropriate answer to the question, why did you leave your last job? By the way, you quit because you wanted to take a break. It's been 1.5 years since you quit. So, I do genuinely believe that the truth is always the best path. Unless you are a class A actor, then anything other than something which is based in the truth is probably going to trip you up. So I'd say cool person if it was me anyway. And maybe when I go and try and get another job, um, I might be saying something similar, which would be you decided that at that point that you had reached the end of your journey with this company. You wanted to take some time out for X reason and X reason and X reason, and now you're ready to come back. What they're going to care the most about is what have you been doing in that year and a half? Most of us are in areas that move on. There's not a lot of skill sets in any kind of professional context that don't grow and evolve relatively quickly over kind of a year and a half. So they are probably going to be curious about how you've spent that time. Have you kept up to date with the trends that are happening in your area? Any training? Have you evolved your skills in any way, shape, or form? So I'd be thinking about investing more of my time, if somebody asked me that question, in trying to explain to them how I've spent that year and a half and why some of the ways I've spent that year and a half are going to help me when I go back into a new role, rather than spending too much time going into some long story about why it was that I chose to move on from my last role. So that's my best advice to you. Keep it short and sweet in terms of why you left your last role. Focus much more on what you've been doing in the past year and a half and how it's prepared you and how you're now in a really strong position to land well and ramp fast in a new role, because that's probably going to be one of their other concerns. Can you readjust to the daily grind and speed of working in particularly Amazon, which is an incredibly fast-paced business? Are you going to land and ramp pretty quickly from a world where you've been your own master, getting up whenever you wanted to get up, etc., to the world that you're going into now? Okay, so moving on then. I hope that was helpful. Let's see what else we have. Okay, Sammy, I'm reading. Okay. Yeah, okay, good, Sammy. Yeah, okay. So let me quickly just bring people along on the story with us. So, taking my masterclasses, excellent. Thank you. I'm glad you think they're awesome. You've your loop tomorrow. Okay, you turned in your writing sample, the innovation one. Okay. And then here's where your questions are. Will the interviewer ask you about it tomorrow? And how bad is it if you use the same topic or project to answer questions for another leadership principle? Say deliver results or customer obsession. Okay, so let me break this apart. So will your interviewer ask you about it tomorrow? Maybe. And this is the problem with a lot of the questions and the answers that I can give you about the Amazon interview process. There's best practice, and then there's what people do. And they're not always the same thing. So, in general, on the loops that I have been on as a candidate, sorry, been on as an interviewer, been on as a hiring manager, and been on as a bar raiser, on very few occasions has the interviewer deep dived into the writing sample with the candidate. Now, primarily that's because the writing sample is there to show whether you can actually write. Sometimes the evidence for the leadership principles is pulled out of that writing sample if at debrief people are discussing a particular leadership principle and looking for evidence on it, and your writing sample speaks to that leadership principle. But the primary purpose of your writing sample is to show whether you can write a document, because no decision in Amazon is ever made without someone having actually written a document. And then everyone sits and reads this document for 30 minutes in silence and then discusses it for another 30 minutes. That's the purpose of the writing sample. However, I have seen on occasion interviewers start asking candidates about their writing sample. Usually it's the hiring manager and the bar raiser who read the writing sample because it is technically their responsibility to do that. So best practice normally, no, but that doesn't mean it never happens. So as I always say, you simply have to be prepared. Okay, so your next question, how bad is it if you use the same topic or project to answer questions for another leadership principle, say deliver results or customer obsession? So Sammy, I'm not clear whether you're asking me how bad it is to repeat the written sample example in interview, leadership principle, behavioral interview, or whether you're asking me using the same example, leadership principle interview to leadership principle interview. So I will cover both. If you're going to repeat, my preferred scenario is that I think the best way of doing that is to repeat between writing sample and interview. Because as I said, quite often you won't be actually asked about your writing sample. So if you actually have a really awesome example in your writing sample and you want to make sure that you get to discuss it with somebody, repeating that one in interview can actually be quite advantageous rather than disadvantageous. So as an interviewer and a bar raiser, I would generally have absolutely no problem if someone repeated the example from their written sample in interview. So that's that kind of interpretation of your question. The other interpretation of your question, which boils down to, is it okay to repeat examples? I think I answer this question in every single Q&A, and I also have a YouTube video about repeating examples. So I will try and do this one pretty briefly, and you can always go back and look at other Q&As and the YouTube video. My advice is avoid repeating if you can. But if you can is really difficult, because by the time you get all the way through to the end of loop, you're going to have been asked probably at least 20 questions. And the majority of people aren't going to have 20 mind-blowingly brilliant, more than 20 mind-blowingly brilliant examples. So there is no major issue with using a really, really strong example that's got multiple different leadership principles in it, because it's such an impressive example for different questions. What you do need to make sure you do is that you really, really reshape that expression of the example for the two different leadership principles. So when you're talking about it in terms of deliver results, really, really focus in on all of the deliver results type behaviors that you demonstrated in that example. And then when you're using it for customer obsession, really, really try and focus in on all of the customer obsession behaviors that you demonstrated in that example. And then that way, even though you're using the same scenario, it actually comes out sounding like a very different example, because you've really indexed heavily on those two different elements. So I don't know, think of it like a meal, I suppose, where you had mashed potato and sausages. You know, you can talk about your meal of mashed potato and sausages, but spend all your time talking about how delicious the sausages were and, you know, how the flavor of the sausages and the salt and the sweet and the whatever, the crunchy skin. This is a very weird analogy. I don't know why I'm going in this way. And then you could also talk about the mashed potato and how creamy and buttery and fluffy and delicious it was. You're still talking about the same meal, but you're focusing on those two different elements. If you can do that, it's not an issue. The number of repeats you do is quite important because Amazon are looking for a really broad spectrum of examples to show that you are incredible consistently across your career. If you can only pull out the same examples over and over, they're going to go, well, those were great examples. There's no doubt about it, but there's only a handful of them. There's not this consistent high performance over time. So you have to try not to repeat too many times. The number of repeats you can get away with does differ depending on your seniority. If you're as old as I am and you've been doing a job for 25 odd years, I don't have much of an excuse to not be able to pull out a large number of examples that don't have a lot of repeats in them. If it was someone who is early on in their career, they've only been in the market for a year or two, then they haven't got the amount of history that I've got, and they are going to have to repeat more examples because they just haven't been in business for very long. So you're going to have to kind of get a bit of a sense, Sammy, of kind of how far along in your career are you, and therefore what do you think kind of feels comfortable in terms of repeats. Rule of thumb, no rules about this, by the way. This is my personal feeling. So you might get a different answer from other people. For someone who is kind of a senior manager, which is an L7 level, I'd be fine with one repeat. More junior than that, kind of an L6, which is usually like a senior something manager. 2, I'd be okay with. As you get down to L5s and L4s, you could easily be looking at 3 or 4 examples repeated over and over and still be okay with it because they just haven't been around long enough. So I hope that covered all of the possibilities in the question that you asked, Sammy. Okay. And if it doesn't, by the way, go back and trawl through all of the other videos because I've said this quite a few times over. Okay. What else have we got here? Rosemary, right, what have we got? Okay, that wasn't a question, but it was lovely and complimentary. Thank you so much, Rosemary. That's so nice of you. Oh, God. Okay. Right. Oh, there is a bit of a question in there. So let me just go down to that one for you, Rosemary. So thank you for my sapphire ring compliment. Where am I? Yes. It's a special something to me. So I appreciate that. So keeping eye contact and not looking at yourself. Don't worry about it. Seriously, Rosemary, do not worry about it one iota. I see loads of comments on places like LinkedIn. I obviously look at other people's kind of coaching content, and there's so much in there about make sure you sit up, make sure you put your shoulders back, don't talk too much with your hands. I'd fail terribly at that one. Make sure your voice goes up and down and is interesting and not monotone. Try and mirror their body language. Try and look them in the eye. Honestly, how are you ever going to remember all of that stuff and remember all of your examples and be actively listening for questions from your interviewer and cues from your interviewer as to whether they're getting bored or whether they're particularly interested? Like, honestly, stuff it. Free yourself from all of that nonsense that I've just described to you, because it doesn't matter, or at least it doesn't matter at Amazon. What matters at Amazon is the data that you share. What matters at Amazon is the evidence that they gather about your behaviors. And if you're constantly looking down there because you're looking at yourself, it doesn't matter. Your interviewer, I promise you, will not judge you or mark you down for not remembering to look straight at the camera. So Don't worry about it. Free yourself of that burden of cognitive load. It will make no difference whatsoever to the outcome of your interview. I hope that helps. Okay. Jasir, good question. Is it appropriate to ask the recruiter to speak to additional people in the team alongside the interviewers in order to get a better idea of the team? So, this is something that I highly recommend once you have the offer. When you're in the interview process, the ball is definitely in the court of Amazon. So you want to focus on your interview, focus on the people they want to talk to you so that they can make a decision on whether they want to hire you. Then once you have the offer, it's at that point I highly recommend what is commonly termed as reverse interviewing. So at that point, the ball is in your court, the power has shifted. They want you, you know that. Now you're in the position to make requests that will help you make a really good decision. So at that point, I definitely recommend choosing people in the organization that you'd like to talk to. You might not know who they are by name, but you might want to say, well, I'd like to meet the person who's been in the team the longest, or I'd like to meet the person who's been in the business the longest. I'd like to meet the person who I'm going to have the closest day-to-day relationship with. Whatever it is that you know is going to help you get under the skin of the exact role and the exact team and the exact company, and ask at that point. If they say no, I'd be thinking, well, why are you saying no? Because at this point, they must really want you. Finding a bar raising candidate at Amazon is not easy. I think it's unlikely they would say no, but you definitely shouldn't be embarrassed to ask. And if they say no, I would be asking them, how come? Like, well, I would love to talk to these people to make sure that I'm making the right decision. The worst thing to do is hire someone and then that person regret and leave after 6 months. So I know I did that. Once I had my offer in hand, I did some reverse interviewing, chose the people I wanted to speak to, and it worked out pretty well for me. So yes, I would go for it, but not until you actually have an offer in hand. Okie dokie. So moving on then. Cool person. Okay, just a quick follow up then. Can you say you quit due to personal reasons or family reasons? You can. It's a little bit obtuse, is the only thing. So, if just giving you kind of what I would be thinking if I asked you that question and you gave me that response, is it would leave me kind of wondering, like, what does that actually mean, family reasons, or what does that mean, personal reasons? So it depends on how honest you want to be. Again, if it was me, I would get into some relatively specific things because those specific things would not be detrimental. So I left my job at Amazon. My father died from COVID in the very early days. My children were going to have to be homeschooled. My husband's a fireman. I felt I needed to be much more present for my family, and I would end it there. Now, maybe you can get that specific, maybe you can't, but I would take yourself to the point where you can be specific enough so that it's not obtuse and they're not left thinking, what does that mean? That kind of sounds like they're trying to avoid answering the question. And at the same time, obviously, don't take yourself to a point where you're giving away so much information, it becomes a complete invasion of your privacy. Only you can decide where that line is drawn. Okay, right, moving on then. Oh, sorry, big jump there. Oh, okay, John Doe. I'm going to answer this one pretty quickly, only to say This is a how long is a piece of string question. And I hate the fact that it's a how long is a piece of string question, but it is. So how long does it usually take for AWS to start the process or reject an application? It depends entirely on the recruiter, where they are with their work stack, on the hiring manager, where they are in their work stack. There's no usual about anything, quite honestly, in Amazon. There are some broad SLA kind of wraps for candidates when it comes to responding to them. There are some broad process steps, but there is so much deviation. But in terms of actual timelines and how long it takes to get from point A through to the end of the road varies so enormously. There simply isn't a normal. So my only advice to you, John Doe, is, and this is my advice to everybody, which is until you have the ink dried on an offer letter from any company, you just assume that you need to keep your job search open. So a month, maybe you'll hear back from them shortly, maybe you won't, but do keep applying, keep your career and your job search going right up until you actually have an offer letter signed, sealed, and delivered. Sorry, that isn't the exact answer you would want, but no one can give you that exact answer, John Doe. I'm sorry. Excuse me, everybody. I'm just going to cough. And I'm going to try and mute my microphone before I cough so that you don't have to hear me cough. Oh. No, I think I failed miserably there. I just realized I clicked mute on the wrong thing. So I'm sorry, everybody who heard me cough there. Sorry, I'm just looking at questions that I think I can give useful answers to. Okay. Vishal, I think I covered your question earlier when I was talking about repeats. So what I said about repeats, I'm just going to pull that one up here. What I said about repeats in terms of the number of repeats, it applies across interviews, across the loops from the first one you have to the second interview, third, fourth. It applies across them in the same way it applies to even within an individual interview. It also applies when you're going from round to round to round. It's ultimately one set of data that everybody looks at the very end of the process. So the kind of the advice that I offer you on repeats applies across all of them, round to round to round, interview to interview to interview to interview, and within interview for a single one-to-one interview. I used the word interview quite a lot there. I apologize, but I hope that made sense. Okay, what else do we have? All right. Okay, the cooling off period for an SDE. Yeah. How long can you apply again to Amazon if I fail an interview? So here's another gray area when it comes to the processes at Amazon. Different teams will have different cooling off periods, and your recruiter should be very specific with you as to what cooling off period they are recommending for you. Usually it's 6 months. It can be 12 months. So I would say check with your recruiter. For some roles, there is no cooling off period because the outcome is that they think that the candidate is amazing, just not right for this role, and they would like them to apply for different roles. I don't think that applies actually for SDEs, because an SDE is an SDE regardless of what part of the business you're operating in. So usually it's 6 months, but sometimes it can be 12. So do please check with your recruiter. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving on. Got 15 minutes. Okay, Anna V. Oh, Anna V, you're back. I've definitely seen you here before. Welcome back. So you've got your final loop for tomorrow for a biz dev, okay, in Mexico. Somebody that used to work for me came from Mexico when they actually launched Amazon in Mexico. That was awesome. Okay, so in the previous interview with a team lead, you gave an example of a project you're most proud of. Okay, moving to your next part. Okay, you designed and executed this and go-to-market strategy for a brand in the US. If the hiring manager asks you something similar and then the bar raiser too, what can you do? Can you repeat? The problem is in the language. If you're asked about the project you're most proud of, well, that's an absolute. They've asked you singularly, what is the project you are most proud of? Now, as an answer to a question, it's not really in line with the leadership principles. This for me is another one of those kind of warm-up questions that isn't in the Amazon interview question bank, isn't one focused on leadership principles or competencies, but is one that people tend to use as a bit of a warm-up question. The tell me about yourself, the why Amazon, the tell me about a project you're most proud of. They aren't really the types of questions that are intended to be used for evidence to hire you, other than if you are able to, and this is always my tip when you're asked these questions, to really land your answers in leadership principles. Because once you start talking about a project that you're most proud of, that, for example, if in order to do that go-to-market strategy, you had to really, really dive deep into the market, do customer research, test different things, understand pricing, all of those types of things where you really, really had to dive deep, then they can use that as evidence for the dive deep leadership principle. So if you're asked exactly the same question, the project that you are most proud of, all you can do is say, well, actually, someone asked me that question already, and I can tell you the project I'm most proud of, but I'll be ending up telling you exactly the same thing that I told them. Do you still want me to answer that question? And if they say, yes, I do, then you tell them exactly the same thing. As an interviewer, I would never say yes, because that's not useful, because I would be reading exactly what you said to the other person at some point, and therefore me asking you the same question is not additive. But some people do say yes, do go on, because they haven't got some kind of backup plan for what they would do if somebody said that. Hopefully they'll say, oh, actually, no, I'll ask you something else, and then they'll move on and ask you another question. But if someone asks you what is the project that you're most proud of, if you tell one person one thing, another person another thing, and then another person another thing, they'll be looking at it going, hang on, I asked her exactly the same question as you did, and she came up with different answers. Why? Are these all the projects she's most proud of? So just think about it logically. Try and land the answer in leadership principles, though, every time, because once you're talking leadership principles, it can be used in evidence in your debrief. Okay, so let's see. What time have we got? Okay. Vladimir. Hello, Vladimir. Welcome. You're okay. You got to loop and you got a not inclined. How quickly can you reapply? Can you reapply another country? So how quickly you can reapply will depend on the outcome of that final loop. Last time, if you were a not inclined recycle, which means they thought you were great, you could be an Amazonian, but you're not quite right for that role, you can reapply straight away. If you got a not inclined no recycle, that means that they really don't think that you are at the point where you are ready to be an Amazonian, and you would not raise the bar in any role that you applied for. and that you need to take some more time before you come back again. In which case, that speaks to what I said earlier when we were talking about the SDE role, which is usually the moratorium is six months, sometimes 12 months. But you do need to ask your recruiter. You need to check with them. Can I reapply straight away, or do I need to wait a while? Only they will be able to tell you the answer to that. Can you apply to a different country? Yes, Amazon is global. You can apply for any role anywhere in the world, but Amazon will not always cover relocation expenses. So usually that is only offered in L6 roles and above. So yes, you can apply, but if you get the job, they won't necessarily support you in your efforts to get visas and to relocate. So you need to make sure that you're clear whether the role that you're applying for does have the support of relocation or not in order for you to make your decision. The next thing to then tell you is any moratorium that exists globally. So if you're told not to reapply for another 6 months to Amazon, that means Amazon. All of your notes, everything that you do in terms of the interview process anywhere in the world is stored centrally and accessible to everybody who works on your process for job application. It is a global concept. I hope that helps. Okie dokie. All right. Yeah, I'm going to pick this question up. Vishal, I'm really pleased you asked this question. So, yes, the 1st of July, the 2 new leadership principles got added. Should you tie your stories around these 2 LPs if your loop is in the next 2 weeks, or will it take some time for these to make it to the interview stage? So, yes, you need to start now thinking about those 2 new leadership principles. I have new information that suggests that those leadership principles are now quite well thought through in terms of all of the things that need to be done to bring them to interview. As I understand it, all of that work is now done and accessible to Amazonians. So if we'd have had this conversation last week, I'd have said, don't worry about it. I didn't think anyone would be asking you questions about it yet. Now I'm saying I think Amazonians are now going to be in a position to be able to test you on those at interview. So yes, you should be preparing for them. I in turn also need to start preparing for it myself, and I'm going to be updating my academy with the information that I can on those new leadership principles and coming up with masterclasses. So at the moment, just to be clear to everybody, I don't currently hold masterclasses on those 2 leadership principles. So at this stage, you're going to have to look at that information in the way that you would do usually. I doubt anyone else is going to have that specific information as yet available to build in their courses either, but all of us will be working very, very hard to introduce that, I'm sure, as soon as we can. So just read them really, really deeply. I've read them. I understand them. I actually think they're less obtuse than some of the other leadership principles. So I would have quite high confidence that you should be able to read them yourself and get a really, really good steer for what Amazon is looking for when it comes to those leadership principles. Okay, I hope that helps. Oh, Sunil. Oh, you got an offer. Oh, and you wanted to thank me for the live sessions on my masterclasses. Oh, yay! I so love getting these through. So please, everybody, a round of applause for Sunil. Crowd goes wild. Congratulations, Sunil. Amazing. The Amazon interview process, I think, is often mooted as probably one of the most difficult corporate interview processes out there. I've been through a few, and it was probably the toughest I've ever been through, but it is possible. Clearly, there are well over 1 million people now working for Amazon. So it's definitely doable. And I love to put these up here because it just gives all of the rest of you, I hope, some confidence that it's absolutely possible to crack it. Well done, Sunil. Program manager roles are awesome because they are so fungible. You can have an incredibly long career at Amazon as a program manager because you can simply just hop from business unit to business unit ad infinitum. Awesome role to get yourself into. Congrats. I think you're going to have a fantastic career there as a program manager. Okay. What else do we have? Okay. So Dipanshu, you're asking me about repeats again. I've mentioned it a couple of times in this session so far, so I'm not going to go over it again. But if you play this back, it will replay on YouTube. I'll add chapters in about 24 hours, and you can get the answer to it then. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes left, but I think I've made my way through most of the questions. So let me just have a quick check back and see if there's anything that I've missed. I did skip, just to be clear, I did skip a couple of questions where people are asking me about very specific things for specific roles that they are interviewing for and how to prepare for those. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not a technical expert in exactly what competencies and experiences are going to happen in particular technical roles. So I wasn't ignoring you, but as I said at the start, there are technical specifics that I simply just can't go into. No one person can know all of that information. There are about 300 different job families in Amazon. All right, then. So what I think we will do, I don't think I missed anything else. Just spinning through. No. Okay. So in which case, guys, I did say to you that I would give you an amazing freebie at the end. And a few people have talked about my masterclasses so far. So let me just pop this up for you. So I mentioned the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy. I have an entire program of masterclasses available to you. You can, sorry, this is my Amazon Invent and Simplify, my string holding up my pop shield. That's Amazon Invent and Simplify if ever we saw it. Okay, and frugality. So many leadership principles in go. All right. So if you go to the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy, you can get access to my Customer Obsession Leadership Principle Masterclass totally and utterly free. Now, I give it away free because obviously I want you to love my content and buy some of it, sure. But also every single one of you that gets interviewed at Amazon, if you make it all the way to Loop, you will definitely be asked Customer Obsession. I can guarantee that. So I make the Customer Obsession one available because it's going to be useful for absolutely everybody. So please go grab it. I promise you it will make a big difference to your interview preparation. I do not chase you with marketing. I know most people give away freebies and then they get your email address and they chase you for marketing. I don't do that. Weird, I know. I'm a veteran marketer, but I don't do that. If my product isn't good enough to convince you to buy it, then that's my fault, not yours. Okay, so on that note, then, I think we are probably done for today. So thank you very much for joining. For those of you who have interviews coming up, I wish you the very, very best of luck. For those of you who got jobs, yay, congratulations. It's on to negotiation. And I will be back again on Monday. So until then, stay safe, guys. It's still, I say this every time, and every time I wish it was the last time I said it, but it's just still crazy world out there. So please, everybody, take care of yourselves. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.